Winter brings with it a brand new year, and alongside that, a brand new hope of a couple of brand new games that are set to release onto the Nintendo Switch this winter. Let's take a closer look at just 8 different titles that are set to launch right before spring sneaks upon us. During the recent Game Awards presentation, one of the biggest and most interesting reveals was the fact that Persona 4 Arena Ultimax is set to launch on Switch on March 17th. This is going to be a digital-only release that's going to include all of the previously available DLC, which also includes a couple of brand new fighters, and is pretty much treated as the conclusion, not just for Persona 3's main story, since Persona 4 was a little bit of a continuation to that, but also the final chapter into the story for Persona 4. And fans have been left wanting more and more of this franchise, so it's definitely good to see this game come back and finally become available on a brand new console. Gunvolt Chronicles Luminous Avenger IX2 is pretty much the continuation of Avengers IX, which released all the way back in September of 2019. And this is a direct sequel with a brand new game that's basically taken the same original speedy and stylish 2D action approach of the gameplay and is bringing it off with a couple of brand new features like the bracelet forms, brand new destructive activities, pretty much high-speed action everywhere you look at it, and they're adding in a couple of brand new characters that were pretty much demanded by the audience as well from the previous game. So they're just continuing this assault of pixelated action Mega Man looking style games that are definitely something that fans have been cheering for and definitely have been supporting. To say that Pokémon's Legends Arceus is the biggest release onto the Nintendo Switch in its first 3 months of 2022 is a little bit of an understatement, and that's for rightful reason. This is pretty much going to be one of the biggest releases for the year, not just for the Switch, but all of gaming. And that's because this game is doing a couple of really different things when it comes to the traditional Pokemon formula. You're going to be basically focusing on surveying, catching, and researching wild Pokemon from a long gone era, pretty much the Sinnoh region being considered in like ancient times. So it's not necessarily like the way you've always thought of it. It's now considered the Hisui region before it became Sinnoh. And while in typical fashion, some people are not necessarily too thrilled about the visual aesthetic or even the visuals, at the end of the day, this game is trying to do something a little bit different that I definitely cannot give too much of a criticism for to Game Freak for attempting to freshen up the experience and try something different that they haven't necessarily done before. If you haven't heard of Monarch, which is also set to release on February 22nd, I wouldn't necessarily blame you. But this is pretty much a strategic Persona style game that is getting a little bit of a buzz and a little bit of a cult following because it's being created by a couple of people who worked on the very official original first couple of Persona games. So whenever you start to consider that, yes, JRPGs have kind of been trying to aim as that Persona aesthetic as reached for the peak, strategy games in that regard haven't necessarily evolved in that regard. And now we're starting to see a little bit of a shift to a little bit more stories focused, not necessarily gameplay focused experience, while still providing the same strategic focus and combat as you typically would expect. Chocobo GP, which is set to launch on March 10th, is trying to fill in that very interesting gap of kart fans that haven't necessarily been getting any love since Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has been king, and pretty much Nintendo is not necessarily interested in releasing any other brand new kart games. Essentially in this one, you're getting a brand new experience featuring a dozen roster of characters from the rather massive pool of Final Fantasy characters. You'll be equipping Magicites to take out the competition as you drift through various familiar courses in online and offline settings and multiplayer. Do remember that for now, this has been revealed as a Nintendo Switch exclusive title, so far for now it's not coming to any other console, so definitely Nintendo is going to be pushing this game as we get closer to launch. Now, Atelier Sophie 2, The Alchemist of the Mysterious Dream, is set to release on February 25th, and this is a really interesting release only because it is a sequel to a game that released so many years ago, I believe almost like a decade ago, that was part of an original trilogy of games that pretty much were continuity from one another, and now this is a direct sequel to the very first game in that regard. It is doing that interesting thing where like they're going into a different world, so it's going to be most likely time capsuled, so they're most likely not going to remember at the end of the game that they come back to the real world, and it's just like, hey, we don't remember what actually happened. So this sequel is probably not going to be like canon in that regard, I'm not necessarily sure, but it is interesting what they're trying to do, connecting a fourth game and wedging it between the trilogy that already existed. So it's a fascinating take for an RPG for sure. Picross S7 is just around the corner, set to launch on January 10th, and it's adding a couple of brand new touchscreen features that I don't necessarily believe were available in any of the previous games. They're also changing some of the things when it comes to linking series and the bonus content that's being added in. If you have like save data from Picross S4, 5, and 6, so you'll also be unlocking a ton of extra puzzles and like mega pieces as well. So you're not just the amount of puzzles you're going to have available in the game, but also it's going to be expanded even more, like I believe 485 puzzles in total if you have a couple of save data from those previous titles. Lastly, Death End Request 2 is set to release on February 8th, and this was a game that was originally a direct sequel to the very first game, Death End Request, and both of these titles were PlayStation 4 exclusives up until just recently. Death End Request just launched on the Nintendo Switch a few months ago, and now the sequel is set to launch in just about a month. So it's interesting to see Idea Factory continuing to support the Nintendo Switch and realizing that the JRPG audience is definitely interested in the hybrid concept and getting these games in a portable format. But that's pretty much all the 8 games that I wanted to cover that are set to release this winter. There is something that I hope give you guys some guidance as to what to check out in the next and upcoming months as we wait for spring and summer for the big and massive releases. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.